was 14 and I started with marijuana and partying all the time and finding pills at parties, and then pills got too expensive and I pretty much went straight to heroin.
Using drugs in high school. It started off as just a way to fit in.
I got started using out of sheer curiosity, seeing other friends doing drugs of different sorts and types. I wanted to fit in somewhat and do what they were doing, especially with older kids. So I started smoking weed and drinking alcohol, and as I got older, things escalated and I began using other drugs of harder form.
And then I found a guy who partied just like I did and did the same kind of lifestyle choices I did. And he was an opiate addict, and we were both in recovery for a short amount of time. And we didn't stay that way, made poor choices, and before you know it, I was hooked on his drug of choice, which would have been opiates and heroin.
My cousin came over and asked me if I wanted to get high with him. And being 14 at the time, I was a little naive, more than I am today. And when he didn't tell me that it was heroin, I knew it was a powder and that I assumed it was a pill. And I, again, didn't assume to ask the question of what it was. I tried it, I snorted a line, and the second I felt it, I was addicted to heroin, full blown. I told my cousin out loud that I wanted to do heroin every day for the rest of my life.
Using when I was in high school to begin with marijuana, drinking my sophomore year. By the time it progressed into college, I was trying cocaine. And then I was a bartender downtown, and I got somebody showed me Oxycontins. And, I started using those, which is an opiate based. And then when those got too expensive, I went to my dealer and asked him if he had some more pills to sell me, and he said no. So he said, but you can try this and it's free. So I tried it and I became addicted to heroin.
Yeah, my drug usage, eventually I became highly addicted. It first started off with painkillers, opiates, and later on it became speed, things such as meth, crack, and eventually heroin. But it kind of progressed up the scale.
I became addicted within 2 months of using. With using on the weekends and everything else, it became a daily use for me very quickly.
I got addicted over the course of a little bit. It didn't take me very long to get addicted to drugs. I started off addicted to drugs like weed and alcohol. I wouldn't say it was more of a daily use, but it was more of the way I used when I did. And as I progressed, I was pretty much addicted to anything I could put into my body.
It took me probably 2 weeks to become physically addicted to heroin.
A lot of changes happened to me just with my whole person. My brain began to think differently. I became more debased in my thinking and my intellect. I started to live kind of moment by moment. Physically, my body was losing weight. I was becoming sick. I would have abdominal pain. Just my mental health altogether started to really deteriorate. I started seeing things that weren't real.
Emotionally, I pretty much lost the ability to feel and to have emotions.
The things that changed for me was my attitude was the biggest thing. I started rebelling against everything and didn't want to do anything with anybody. I wanted to isolate myself.
I was all about the drugs. I did anything I could to get them, from stealing to robbing my family, too many crimes, to barely keeping a job, living out of my car.
The withdrawals were terrible for me. It was like the flu times 100. I was getting sick. I, couldn't stay away from the toilet. It was restless legs. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat.
Heroin was different, and it didn't take any amount of time to get to a point where you have to withdraw. There's no getting around it. And sleep isn't real. It's not even a thing. And I felt like I went nuts because I couldn't grasp why I was still alive.
I remember times just screaming into my pillow, just from the agony of not having the drug. And then even in the long term, not just even initially, but in the long term, it took a long time for my brain just to heal from certain thinking patterns.
But I hurt in my bones. You know, my back hurt, but not just like your back hurts, like in your bones, you know? You couldn't eat, but you're starving and you lose your bowels. And, you know, because who knows how long it's been since you've had a normal bowel movement, because that's what opiates do.
An average day for me was I would wake up and I would contemplate where I was getting money from. I would usually steal something. I would have to find somebody or think of a way to steal anything I possibly could just to be okay for that day. And as soon as I was okay, I would do it all over again all day long.
You live moment by moment, and so you don't think ahead, but you're always thinking and scheming of how I could get money, where I could get drugs, who could I steal from today.
My cousin, who I started doing heroin with, was always, you know, we'd always go out, and for several years we went and we'd do crimes all day long, crime after crime after crime.
All you're on your mind is getting that first shot. So in that process, I would have to either hustle somebody for some money, go out and commit a crime, or manipulate my family somehow to enable me to get me money, lie to a friend or a family member or cousin to somehow get the money going so I could get well, and then continue on that process the rest of the day to keep stealing, robbing, cheating, whatever I could do to continue getting high.
My turning point was I got in trouble with the law, and it was my first time being in trouble with the law, and I ended up going to prison.
I died on my mom's birthday, May 12th, 2014. I was told by my drug dealer that I wasn't supposed to do all of what I had got from him, and it was stronger and new. And being young and dumb, I thought I knew better than he did, and I didn't. I ended up in the hospital for the night on my mom's birthday, and the next day I made the decision that I wasn't going to do it anymore. I went back on my word for not doing it the rest of my life.
And after the second overdose, I realized the first thing I said to the gentleman I was with was, "Are we out?" And later that day or the next day, I told him that I'd surrendered to addiction and I was going to die this way, and I was good with it. Whatever the junkie lifestyle had in store for me, I was down, you know? And then like 2 weeks later, I could see people's faces and hear their voices, and it was like something just came down and touched me on the head. You're gonna die, and I mean it. What are you gonna do?
The thing that turned me around and led me to recovery was really taking into perspective where my life had gone in terms of my relationships with my family, my old friends, the people that loved me and supported me the most. And more than anything, I would say the lack of love I had for myself. I hated myself, I hated my life, I was suicidal.
What's helped me most in recovery has to be the support group I have around me. I have some of the most amazing friends and people around me that growing up or while I was addicted to heroin, I didn't even know these kind of people existed. So
The best help for me is, you know, doing my 12-step program and contacting women and having a circle of women to count on. You know, men too, but mostly for me it's women. Being able to contact them no matter what and being able to share what's really going on in my life.
For me, the most beautiful part of recovery is I have an awareness of myself, and it's real. And there's this unity amongst us, people in recovery that really live a recovered lifestyle. We're brothers and sisters fighting a fight. You know?
I think the first thing that I would say to anybody who's contemplating on using is focus on what you want in life, because it doesn't matter whether you pick up once or twice, you could immediately become addicted to it, and it's not something that you can stop right away.
I know a lot of the times people want to use because their friends are using, and sometimes it looks attractive, and You might even be popular if you do use drugs, but it's not worth it in the end. It is a lie, and it will not only strip you from your family and your hobbies, but it'll eventually take your life.
We are taking this problem seriously in Ohio and are doing something about it.
We are fighting this problem on a number of fronts with a determination to make a difference.
Some of the ways that we have attempted to combat the problem locally is not just with enforcement, but it is also services that we have tried to provide to those who are addicted or inmates of the correctional system. We provide long-term counseling options as well as short-term counseling options for those who are inmates, as well as long-term rehab situations that we've tried to help fund.
As far as law enforcement and decriminalizing the addict, we in our community have made a movement toward more treatment rather than sending these people to prison. Prison is not rehabilitative for the addiction survivor. And now we even have our officers being trained. We have a thing called DART, where if a person ODs, they go to the hospital and DART helps them get into treatment, not jail or prison.
Law enforcement's taken a different approach now with the heroin issue. We're focusing a lot of energy right now on treatment of the addiction. We've got drug courts in place, trying to get these folks help, trying to get them the tools to deal with the addiction themselves.
So we have protocols that we treat patients that come in for withdrawal, and basically they're PRN medications or medications that are as needed to control the symptoms, which would be some of the ones that we talked about with the nausea or the tremors or the stomach pain, the diarrhea. So we treat all of those individually as they have symptoms, and we have a specific protocol that's outlined with all those medications.
The name of the drug that I use is Vivitrol. It does come in a pill form. We do not use the pill form very often because most of the people that come in to the clinic have had a drug problem for quite some time, and maybe their drug of choice was Percocet. So we don't want to get them used to the pills because they have a choice whether to take it or not, and they could have withdrawal and not even realize what they're doing. Whereas when they get the Vivitrol, the injectable form, it stays in the system for about 28 days, and then they would return to the clinic every 28 days. With the Vivitrol injection, they would receive counseling, which of course is one of the most intricate parts of receiving the injection, because the mind and body works together. And so usually there's an underlying reason why they began taking the drugs to begin with. And so anxiety plays into that. So sometimes we will, when they come back for their second injection, we'll say, how did you do? You know, did you have any withdrawal? Do you feel like using? That's my big question to them. Do you feel like you have the need to use? And 99.9% of them say no. It made me forget the very thing I thought I wanted. And however, I am still anxious, so I treat the anxiety with a non-narcotic medication to help them with their counseling and use of the medication. The Vivitrol injection does not, it's a non-narcotic. There is not any withdrawal from that injection. So they could be on it 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. The recommended dosage is 1 year because they want to make sure that the patient's body and mind are in the same place, and that they're safe. The only problem is if you have a patient that has been court ordered and they're not really serious about the drug and getting clean, the problem would arise when they would decide to go back and use again, because they may think that they're just going to start at the same depth of drug use that they were using prior to taking the Vivitrol injection, and that is potentially lethal to them.
That is why it's important for patients to understand that a physical medication that's being given to them is going to be one piece of their recovery. That psychological impact and the social impact for people is a great factor in why people relapse. I think when they begin to feel physically a little bit better, they think they can go out and conquer the world and that everything's going to be okay. And once they're presented with something negative or something happens in their life, they automatically go back to what they know, which was using, and that's how they've dealt with and managed to deal with their life. So we really help point them in the right direction to make sure that they understand it's not just the physical recovery, which takes a long time. That's a long process in itself, but that emotional and psychological impact is really where they have to understand it's about relearning